Imagine that you're overseas, loading cargo, hot desert, flying missions, doing your job without hesitation. Now imagine years later, after you finally get out, you start experiencing a persistent cough, difficulty breathing, strange fatigue that just won't go away. Then comes the real shock. You learn that in the air you breathe, near smoldering pits of trash, medical waste, plastic, and jet fuel may have been the reason for the health being deteriorating. That's just hypothetically the story. I served in Kuwait. Nearly every day I worked near an open burn pit. Open burn pit. At the time, I didn't think too much of it. It was just a part of the environment. But my symptoms I developed now that I'm still currently dealing with is respiratory issues that led me to start asking questions. And I learned that I am far from the only one that has experienced this. According to the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, more than 3.5 million service members may have experienced or been exposed to burn pits during deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and surrounding areas. The exposure has become such a serious health issue for many veterans. So what exactly are burn pits? Burn pits are large, open-air areas used on military bases as well as off military bases to dispose of waste and all metals, plastics, paints, electronics, medical waste, even animals, dead animals. These pits were common in the U.S. bases and combat zones, especially during the 9/11 time of war, because they offered a fast, low-cost solution for waste removal in environments with limited infrastructure. And I don't know if you've ever been to those kind of areas, but it's really desert, and you usually get something like a base here and there, and then the straight sand. However, the smoke released from these pits contain a toxic substance, including dioxins, benzene, and heavy metals, according to the Congressional Research Service report. These substances are linked to both short and long-term health risks, while alternatives like incinerators and regulated disposals existed. They weren't really widely implemented during those times. Now let's talk about how this affects health. Veterans exposed to the burn pits have reportedly a wide range of conditions, including asthma, chronic bronchitis, such as I'm dealing with for myself, sinusitis, it's so hard to say that, persistent cough, and in some cases, rare cancers. I personally experienced breathing issues, and that began after my deployment and has continued on since. There are also public stories of other veterans who have experiences reflected this in a growing concern. For example, a Marine veteran who never smoked was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in his 30s after deployment that included constant exposure to a burn pit. This case and others were documented in military times, highlighted in the widespread of the nature of these issues. To better understand and track these exposures, the VA created the Airborne Hazards and Open Burn Pit Registry. This registry allows veterans to document their exposure and the symptoms to support ongoing research into long-term health effects. In 2022, the honoring of our PACT Act was signed into law. It marked a significant change in how the U.S. government handled toxic exposure cases, including those involving burn pits. The act expanded the list of presumptive conditions and locations for veterans seeking VA healthcare benefits. That means for certain diagnosed conditions, the government now recognizes a connection to service without requiring any additional proof. Can you believe that? While this legislation and registry exists, it's important to note that the topic of burn pit exposure continues to evolve. Research is still ongoing. Healthcare policies are still being implemented, adjusting in response to the new findings. For some veterans, the process of diagnosis and recognition remains complicated. In summary, burn pits were widely used during U.S. military operations as a method of waste disposal. Exposure to the toxins then released have been linked to a range of self-harming. Oh man. I'm trying. Exposure to these toxins they release have been linked to a range of serious health issues among veterans. My experience with symptoms following my deployment respects a broader pattern that has only recently begun to receive national attention. Not all wounds are visible. Understanding the long-term consequences of the military service, especially in regard to environmental exposures like burn pits, adds another layer to how we see the cost of war. And it helps explain why the issue continues to be studied and addressed today. Thank you.